How are you, Jim? Nice to see you.
Comedy Samurai is such a cool book, but I have to start with something that I don't think most people are going to touch on. I cannot believe you were a writer for Mad About You. That so doesn't fit.
Yeah, I was a showrunner actually on Mad About You. So I kind of was in charge of the entire show. That came off of Seinfeld. I had done Seinfeld for a few years. I had kind of hit the wall creatively. I could have stayed there forever, but I'm a gambler and I wanted to roll the dice and do a new challenge. And I was in the middle of kind of a difficult marriage, quite honestly. And here was a show about a marriage that was kind of ideal that I just didn't buy. Like, whose marriage is like that?
No one's.
It was like a fantasy. And I thought, what if I could do like a kind of a scenes from a marriage, like a sitcom that isn't necessarily as funny as Seinfeld, but gets into the reality and the truth of what being married is about. And the two actors, Paul and Helen, were great and they were totally into it. And that's what we did for the couple of years that I was there.
I love it. I love it. This book is so cool. I have so many questions, but there's a theme through here I wanted to touch on. I was thinking about you talk about counterculture comedians when they're at their best. You kind of push the envelope. Like, growing up for me, it was Richard Pryor, and my dad used to listen to Red Fox in the car, and
Yeah.
I don't think people understood his stand up was wow. He
Yeah.
he really pushed it, and you go back to Carlin. When I watch Shane Gillis go on SNL, and half the room is like he made him so uncomfortable during that. Do you, as a writer and as a comedian, do you appreciate what he did?
I'm not, I'm not afraid of people crossing the line, of people offending people. I remember, and I'm sure you do too, when Andrew Dice Clay was on Saturday Night Live
Yeah.
and Nora Dunn walked off the show. That's kind of what's supposed to happen in comedy, in my opinion. You're supposed to risk offending people because your ideas are so radical that some people are going to be uncomfortable with it. And right or wrong, I think that is the role of comedy, is to push that barrier. And so you talk about Richard Pryor or George Carlin, but there's a lot of comedians, Sam Kinison, Clay, maybe Shane Gillis is an example of that today, who are pushing those boundaries in one way or another. And not it's you're not going to get universal acclaim. That's not a bad thing. Think about Andy Kaufman.
Yeah.
The great comedians risk that alienation with the audience. I think it's necessary to find the new language of comedy.
I thought Mulaney, when he talked about his rehab and his issues, for a guy who was really, I wouldn't say milquetoast, but a very safe, kind of fun comedian, for him to go where he went, that took a lot of courage because he could have just grenaded his whole career by doing that.
Well, it's very analogous, don't you think, to George Carlin when George
Yeah.
Carlin was doing that straight stuff on Ed Sullivan, the hippy dippy weatherman, and then suddenly he was doing the 7 words you can't say on TV. So comedians, like musicians, like artists, evolve. Some of them do, and those are the ones that we usually are have the most kind of personal connection to.
Were you guys aware when you were working on Seinfeld that I wouldn't say you aspired to stir things up, but there was an undercurrent to watching Seinfeld going, there's an edge to this show, and the men and women who are writing this knew exactly what the hell they were doing.
Well, I will tell you that at the beginning of the show, Larry David said to me, we'll do 13 episodes. We'll make a little money. It'll get canceled. Then we'll move on with our lives. And throughout the entire show, while I was there, Larry wanted the show to get canceled. He couldn't take it anymore. So, we didn't worry about what the impact was. We were just worried week to week of what we were going to write, what the story was going to be. But we were attracted because we didn't have any sense of it succeeding. We were attracted to the things that made us laugh. And as it turned out, the things that made us laugh made the world laugh too. And it worked out.
Yeah, what's the old thing as a parent is sometimes it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. Was that kind of the mindset with when you were writing that stuff?
Well, our motto was no hugging, no learning. So that was kind of we were free in a way to write what we thought was funny. And because the show wasn't doing well, it was losing in the ratings to Jake and the Fat Man, which you remember also. We felt like we're just going to do what we think is funny and try to do the funniest show we can and not worry about the consequences. And then only in retrospect did we realize, oh wow, this became Seinfeld. This show became Seinfeld, the Seinfeld that everybody, the institution of Seinfeld.
So, Larry, in the book, you talk about Borat, obviously. I mean, that's one of those movies 50 years from now we'll be watching and laughing our ass off. And I was thinking about the anniversary of Spinal Tap. Now, Spinal Tap, a mockumentary, they knew what they were doing. Everything were set scenes, everyone was in on it. You're going around the country. How do you direct that? How do you, I mean, you have to pretend you're really filming a documentary. That had to be challenging and scary at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, Spinal Tap, I love Spinal Tap, but everybody in Spinal Tap was an actor. And
Right.
there was no risk of violence or police action. When we did Borat, there was only one person, Sasha, who actually was somewhat scripted and only somewhat scripted. We didn't know what these other people were going to say. We didn't know how they were going to react. And that unpredictability, that volatility comes off the screen. And I think that's one of the reasons the audience related to it so much. It's like, this is more than a movie. This kind of spills out outside the screen itself. And I think the audience really appreciated a humor, a comedy, a new sort of voice of comedy, a new language of comedy, which is what that was.
Your book to me is I call them coffee books. I sometimes I get a good book that I want to sit down and read, get a nice cup of coffee, turn my phone off, and just disappear. And I'm not going to Kindle this. I need the book itself, Larry. I want to read this Comedy Samurai, the mostly epic quest of a mostly on time Jewish comedian. That's a great title. That's a great title, man. There's so much in this book to think about, and you got me thinking about comedians more and more as well. Do you like the direction we're going with comedy, with podcasting? Are we getting back to maybe people being a little more aggressive, for lack of a better word, or are we still in a cancel culture?
Well, the way I look at it, I see very little true funny comedy in TV and movies. I think because they have to be filtered through this kind of corporate culture now, with a lot of people, a lot of cooks, as they say, it gets sanitized and it gets flattened out and it gets very derivative. And so the only place that I actually see comedy with integrity, people trying to push those boundaries, is in stand up. I think stand up is flourishing right now because it is free. It's much a freer medium than TV or movie comedies are right now.
My son is 21. He is a big film, movie, music guy, and we talk. He always asks me. He goes, "Give me a movie," and he's a college student, and I'll send him stuff. I had him watch the movie MASH, and he texted me back and went, "This is nothing like the TV show." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, that it's totally different." But that's to your point, Larry. I mean, you can't do that movie now. You can't even touch that movie now.
Right, but you could get on stage and talk about anything.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's the difference now, I think. And the live audience, once again, as I've been saying, the live audience really appreciates the liberation of hearing somebody talk the truth in some kind of venue, and stand up is where you hear that. Seinfeld was a place where that happened. Borat was a place that happened. Curb was a place that happened. But it's very rare today to see it on a TV screen or a movie screen. But if you go to see stand up, you will see some very liberating comedy.
When someone says thank you for your service, I'm a veteran. When they say it, I say thank you. But at the same time, in the back of my head, I laugh my ass off because of the curb moment. That's one of the funniest things. To your point, you got to know where you're going with that, or you're going to really piss off a lot of people.
Yeah, no, that became, and that's Larry. Larry is somebody who, I think that's an important point with Seinfeld, with Curb, with Borat, with things like that, questioning the common wisdom. Like thank you for your services. It had a lot of meaning at one time, and now it's kind of lost its meaning. It's almost become a cliche,
It's a
and
crutch.
so that's why Larry in that episode was, didn't bother saying it. He just said hello. And he was more sincere than all the people that said thank you for your service, but it had consequences.
You're awesome. Larry, I really do appreciate the time. You get me thinking about stuff. I like books that make me step back and digest it and what you're doing with Comedy Samurai. You're always welcome here in the Motor City. You know that. And I'd love to talk more, man. I know we don't, our time is short, but yeah, this is a great read. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you so much, Jim. And I can't wait to come out to Detroit and see you in person.
Come on to Ridley's. We'll set it up. Talk
Oh,
to you soon.
sounds good.
Thanks.